Thanks.
Okay. We can start letting people in. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are so excited that you have gathered with us this afternoon for our Abundant Life webinar series, Healthy Aging and Mental Well-Being. We will begin in just a few seconds as we allow people to come in, and as we would check those who are coming in. If you could please mute yourselves, that will be helpful as we navigate this important discussion. We are excited. We have a church joining us, a church group joining us. And so hopefully they have gotten connected and they are coming in on today to be with us. This is our final webinar for the series for the spring. Of course, in the fall, we will have a number of presentations that we will be sharing with you. And we will share those with you in an upcoming email. And so at this time, we will begin our webinar, Healthy Aging and Mental Well-Being with Loy Campbell. We are excited to have her with us. As with most of our programs, we will begin with a time of centering. And so today, as I was meditating on how we should begin, I thought that once we enter into the space, we would first start by just taking a deep breath. And as we release that breath and as we focus our hearts and our thoughts, my prayer is that for this moment, we can hold space for those who are in our families, those who are in our congregations, and those who are in our communities who may be having any mental challenges in this moment. My prayer is that we can hold space for those who are aging and may feel that there is some type of decline happening, maybe confusion or forgetfulness, or those things that just come natural with aging. My prayer is that we can hold space for those who have diagnosed conditions such as dementia and Alzheimer's. And as we would hold space for them, they would feel the presence of God and they would experience peace and they would experience comfort. My prayer is that we could hold space for caregivers and those in the medical field who work to care for our loved ones, our family members, our friends, those who have patience and understanding when it seems like the world around many of their patients is confusing and unclear. And so we pray that in this moment, as we would hold space for all of those who I've mentioned, and even those concerns and those individuals that I have not, that they would feel the presence of God. Amen. And so today's presentation is brought to you by Partners in Health and Wholeness. We are an initiative of the North Carolina Council of Churches, and this slide right here shows you all of the members of our staff. And so many of you have connected with us. And so we hope that if we can be of assistance to you and your congregations, that you make sure that you reach out to us. We'll also share our initiative-wide email at the end, PHW info. So if you just have a general question, that someone can address that there. This year, the council is celebrating its 90th anniversary, and we are so godly proud of what God has been doing through the North Carolina Council of Churches. You will see a link in the chat box because we are currently registering for our gathering. We are calling it a grand celebration. It will take place on November the 1st. And so details about that activity and what is happening and our presenters. You may notice we have a really great presenter coming and a day of activity. And so if you have been engaging with the work of the North Carolina Council of Churches, we invite you to come and celebrate with us. There will also be on that same site that you will visit, there will be registration for our upcoming legislative seminars. And so the next legislative seminar will take place on Tuesday, May the 13th in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so we encourage and invite you to sign up for that as well. And so I believe our church group is joining us. I just saw them come on into the room. And so we are excited about that. If you've been following us, you may have already accessed our Abundant Life Congregational Study Guide for the mind, the body, and spirit. This is the QR code to access that. You can get a downloaded edition. Hello, Trinity. We just started. You haven't missed anything. We're excited to have you. And so, with the Abundant Life Study Guide, you have 4 sessions, and a number of congregations and small groups have engaged in the study guide, and we're getting a lot of great feedback. And the next few weeks, you'll get an email from us, and we'll be seeking more feedback on your experience with our study guide. At this time, we're asking you to download it, but I do believe we still have a few hard copies if you would like to contact us via our website and request some. And so on today, I am going to stop sharing my screen. I would like to introduce you to our speaker, Loy Campbell. Loy is an occupational therapist and a dementia care specialist with over 10 years of experience across several settings. She is with Campbell Care Consultants, and she guides families and communities through aging and dementia care, offering consulting, speaking, and training. Loy has led dementia care workshops around the country for a variety of groups, including family care partners, long-term care staff, faith communities, law enforcement, nutritionists, and dietitians, hospital nurses, and physical, occupational, and speech therapists. And so we are so excited that Loy is with us. Her presentation is supported by her work with the Dementia Alliance of North Carolina, and we will share their link in the chat so that you can contact them. And so, Loy, at this time, we welcome you to the stage, and you can go ahead and share your screen with our viewers and participants.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Arlisha. It is such a joy to be here with you all today. Being with faith communities is one of my favorite things to do in this work. It brings lots of different perspectives to the table, right? Because some folks here are caregivers of people living with dementia. Some people here may be living with dementia themselves. Other people are in community supporting people who are caregivers of people living with dementia. Some folks here are representing church leadership. So there's all kinds of different voices in the room, and faith communities are a place where we love each other and we see each other through on these life transitions. And so it's one of my favorite groups of people to be with. So it's really a pleasure for me this afternoon. So I decided to title this Creative Congregations, Supporting People Living with Dementia, because it takes a lot of creativity and openness and thinking outside the box in order to really support people with dementia and their loved ones in our congregations. The first thing I want us to think about is, what do we mean by dementia? What is dementia and what is not dementia? Because this is kind of a big term, right? So I've got a couple of scenarios here on the screen, and I'm wondering if folks might recognize some of these. So you walk into a room and you've not known why you went in there until you see the item you came in for, right? Or you see somebody's face that you recognize, but, oh, I can't remember their name. What was their name? And then later that afternoon, that's right, that was Arlisha from the Council of Churches. And referring to, that place where the Walgreens used to be. What is it now? What is it now? It used to be the Walgreens. That one on the corner there, right? We're not quite sure what the new name is, but we know what it used to be. Or I missed an appointment. They called me and said, "Where are you?" I said, "Oh, I forgot about that appointment," right? Or I have so many things going on that I missed a task, right? Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands because it's happened to all of us, right? And so these kinds of moments can cause us to have a little bit of a fright, panic, even for some people. Is this happening to me? What is happening in my brain? Right. And so I want us to think about, as we get started, what is normal aging and what might be a warning sign that something has changed. It might not necessarily be dementia, but something has changed. So these are a couple of things. We've got 2 slides here thinking about what is normal and what is a warning sign. So that forgetting the name but remembering it later, that is totally normal aging. That happens to the best of us, right? But when that memory loss starts to disrupt our daily life, we're repeating ourselves over and over again, right? We can't get through that day, right? Normal aging, occasional errors in your finances, right? Your bills. But if I can't even plan or solve problems, I can't get through any of my bills. They start calling for collecting, even though I have the funds, I'm just not able to figure out how to use them, right? That becomes a warning sign that something is different. Needing occasional help with something that's new, right? There's all this technology and it's constantly changing. We might need the help of somebody who's more familiar with it. But if I start not knowing how to use that TV that hasn't changed in the past 10 years, that's a warning sign. I'm not sure how to play a game I've always played my whole life. I'm not sure how to get from here to there, right? That can be a warning sign. Not knowing the day of the week for a moment, right? I give people credit if they're within a day or two, especially if we're retired, because our days might be less regimented than they used to be when we were working. But if I don't know what city I'm in, I don't know what month it is, right? That can be more of a warning sign. Some more things that are totally normal: vision changes due to other issues like cataracts, glaucoma, macular degeneration. We see a lot of these more commonly in older adults. But if I don't understand the actual image or the spatial relationship, right? So I'm starting to walk through a room and I miss a step, or I try to step over an area rug because to me, I think it's a hole in the ground, right? Or I misplace something and I miss the table because I don't see that distance that the table actually ends right there, right? That can be a more significant warning sign. Anybody ever had trouble finding the right word? The thing with the oh, right? Trying to find that word, but eventually we can describe it. It's the one with the buttons on it and it helps the TV to go, right? So I can describe it pretty well and that I'm talking about a remote, right? But if this is a new problem and I just can't, the thing that that does the one that goes, right? I'm talking around it in a pretty big way. That can be more of a warning sign. Occasionally misplacing things, but I can retrace my steps and find it, right? Or misplacing things and I can't retrace my steps and find it. I find something in the totally wrong place, right? I find my ice cream in a cabinet somewhere, right? That's more concerning. Making mistakes or poor decision on occasion, but that can be normal, but something that's really different from your baseline. Our baseline meaning how we've usually been, right? That's really the crux of thinking about normal aging versus warning signs of dementia. When something used to be really important to me and it's not, that can be a real warning sign that we want to get checked out. Could also be other medical conditions, but we want to make sure that we get that checked out. Same thing with social obligations, having a disinterest versus total withdrawal, right? Or changing your hobbies versus a total withdrawal. and then having your specific routine, right? Versus having a change in mood or personality. So this kind of is a lot of information. I have a handout that Arlisha is going to make sure gets out to everybody at the end. So don't feel like you have to take notes on any of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. But I wanted to kind of give you that idea of what's normal and what's not normal and could be a warning sign, something that you might want to get checked out by your physician. So when we think about normal aging, right? So all of those things that were in that column on the right, where things are changing when we age, even when we don't have dementia, our brains are changing and our bodies are changing. So as a congregation, let's think a little bit about what's changing for our older adults and how can our churches be more supportive. So the first thing that a lot of people probably already thought of is visual changes, right? So a lot of times people will have age-related changes or these diseases that are more common in aging, like macular degeneration, glaucoma, things like that, that make vision more challenging. So thinking about having large print bulletins available, safety measures such as higher contrast. So I put exclamation points after the word contrast, right? We want to make sure that if there's a step or there's a change in the level where somebody is going to potentially have a tripping hazard, that we make a really high contrast there. We put a bright pink line, something that's going to draw people's attention to the fact that something is different here. My mom has a big crack in the driveway at her house because there's a tree branch, a tree root that's growing underneath. And she painted in bright yellow and orange a Band-Aid over that spot, right? So it looks kind of cute and funny, but it gets people to look at it so that nobody is going to trip on that crack that is kind of bowing up in the driveway. So things like that, even in your parking lots of your churches. And of course, handrails, because as we have visual changes, our risk of falling is higher. We don't want folks to fall in our community. Hearing changes. So a lot of your churches have probably already implemented some of these systems, hearing aid systems that loop throughout the entire worship service. Noise reduction in common areas. So putting up banners and carpet and other kinds of things that will soak up some of the noise, which can make it really hard when people are hard of hearing. And then thinking about how we speak, speaking clearly, but not yelling, right? Because increasing that volume too much, it doesn't actually help. We just want to make sure that we're speaking clearly and maybe slow down a little bit so that we're not jumbling our words. And then cognitive changes. So like we just talked about, things change in our brains when we're aging. And it's not a sign, always a sign of dementia. It's just how the brain slows down its processing time. So that is normal aging. We can only do one thing at a time, right? So when we're in a meeting, when we're in a conversation, working with people in our congregations, we want to make sure we address one thing at a time. We slow down and give people time to process what we're talking about in meetings. So maybe even some quiet moments during those meetings. It's very helpful today that we have this webinar on record so that people can go back and look at that recording if there's something that they've missed and they want to think through again, right? And then reminders at time changes. So have you ever been to church on the day that daylight savings starts or ends, right? People are either coming late or coming early because of a change in the routine, right? So as our brain ages, it's harder to change that routine. And so when we have those times, we have a new event or we've changed the worship time or we have daylight saving time starting or ending, we want to make sure that we help folks out with some cues, either a call the day before to remind them or helping them with a call that morning or with an email blast, something to help people recognize that something in their routine is changing, right? Because otherwise that's hard for our brains as we age. So let's talk a little bit about dementia. This is my specific area of passion and really my calling in the work that I do is thinking about what is dementia and how can we help support people with dementia and their caregivers. So when we say the word dementia, most people think Alzheimer's disease, right? Because that is the most widely known disease that causes dementia. But dementia is actually an umbrella term. So it is not actually a diagnosis that you get, but it's a bigger term. So an analogy that helps some people is to think about the term cancer, right? So while cancer is a diagnosis, it's more of a concept, right? The concept of cancer is there are cells in your body that have run amok, right? And they are causing lots of problems. But within that umbrella of cancer, there are lots of different diseases, right? You don't go to the doctor and they say, well, you have cancer, right? They say you have breast cancer, you have lung cancer, you have skin cancer, right? And we understand that these are all in the umbrella, but they're all a little bit different too, right? We treat them a little bit differently. They have different symptoms, right? They're going to cause things to be different for those different people, right? So we have diagnoses such as Alzheimer's disease, but there are actually a whole lot more diseases under that umbrella of dementia. So in order to be in that umbrella of dementia, somebody has to have a cognitive change that is a failure of the brain. So it's like any other organ failure, except that the brain runs our entire body. And so that's going to cause some different things than if we had a lung disease or a kidney disease, right? And cognitive change that has to be chronic, right? So it's going to last. There's nothing that we can do actually right now to cure any of the forms of dementia. We have some drugs that help people to cognitively work a little better, but we can't actually cure those diseases at this time. It is progressive, so it will change over time, right? There are other diseases that are also progressive, mostly neurological diseases, which dementia is under that umbrella. And actually, dementia is terminal. All of those diseases eventually will cause the brain to decline enough that it becomes terminal, right? So in order to meet that criteria, that's what we have to know about the condition. And you've heard of some of these diseases, the ones under the umbrella, Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia. That's what Robin Williams had before he died. Vascular dementia, that has to do with the blood flow in the brain. Frontotemporal dementias, so that causes changes in the frontal lobe and often the temporal lobe. So language changes, personality changes, things like that. Parkinson's, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. There are over 100 different types of dementia. So please don't ask me to name all of them because I can't. But these are some of the really common ones that you will see. So you might hear people using dementia and Alzheimer's a little differently, but now you know the difference. Alzheimer's is a disease, but it's under the umbrella of dementia, just like these other diseases that are causing these cognitive changes. So here we have two different pictures of brains, and this is from a really neat study they did at the University of Alabama quite a while ago. I think it was back in the 90s, where they had people who donated their brains to science. They made that choice before they died that they were going to donate their brain. And what you notice here, I wish that I could, oops. I wish that I could see the chat right now because I'm guessing if I asked you to put in the chat, what are the things that you notice that are different between these two brains? You probably all say the same three things, right? Which is that the one on the right, the size is smaller, the grooves are a lot bigger, right? It's more shriveled up, and the color is darker, right? And what we know about these two people who donated their brains is that they were the same in every way that you could be the same. They were the same age, they were the same gender, they had the same level of education, their heads were the same size, right? In the ways that we norm people, they were all the same. What we know is that the brain on the right is someone who died at the end of Alzheimer's disease. And the brain on the left is someone who died very suddenly in an accident, right? They did not have dementia when they died. And so this helps us to see what is really happening inside the brain, because it's really challenging with dementia because people can look the same as they've always looked, right? They're dressed up, they are ready for church, they are getting to that seat, right? And yet they're not able to find their way in the hymnal. They're not able to figure out how we go up for communion. They're not able to make conversation the way that they used to after church at lemonade time, right? And so things are different, but we can't really see it in the same way that some other disease processes we can see. So I've had a lot of caregivers tell me that seeing pictures like this really helps to validate what they're noticing, because if your brain looks like the brain on the right, how is it going to be able to function the same way as the brain on the left? It's not, right? We're going to have a lot of changes. So some of the things that we see that change when people are living with dementia, the first thing that everybody knows, because we all know a lot about Alzheimer's, right, is that the memory changes, right? And so we lose short-term memory and concrete facts, right? Those people's names, especially the ones we've just met, they're out the window, right? What we had for breakfast, things like that, those short-term memories are frequently affected, especially in Alzheimer's disease. However, we retain a lot of long-term memories and emotional memories, right? And that's retained for a lot longer in this disease process. And that's wonderful for our church communities, right? Because you might have seen somebody who's living with dementia who is having trouble following the flow of the service. But if you come to that hymn that they have known since they were 4 years old, right? They are belting it out with the best of us, right? And so those long-term memories, and it's an emotional memory. This is what they used to do when they were a child. They came to church with their mother and their grandmother, right? And so being in that sacred church space that's a long-term memory for them can be really comforting. And you'll notice if it's comforting or if it's distressing, right? And then that caregiver can help make a choice as to whether coming to church is helpful for this person, or maybe we bring some of those practices home or to whatever community they're living in. But keeping some of those long-term memories that have really been comforting to the person throughout their life is a wonderful way that we can use faith in order to bring comfort for people living with dementia. Language is another thing that can really change when people are living with dementia, both understanding language and also producing or speaking. So frequently when we are losing language, we lose those nouns, right? Those names, whatever that item is that we're looking for, and also formal language. So the way that I'm talking to you right now, which is in very long sentences with very few pauses, right? Your brain is having to keep up with that. And that would not be a good way to speak with somebody who is living with dementia, right? I would want to make my sentences shorter, lots more time for processing, because that understanding of language is going to be changing, as well as producing the language, right? If I can't come up with the words I'm looking for, it's going to be difficult for me to produce the sentences that I'm looking for. What is retained in our language skills? Music and rhythm, prayer, social chit chat. Hey, how you doing? Oh, beautiful day, isn't it? Boy, you look so good. Oh, that dress is wonderful. Oh, right? All that nice social chit chat that we make. How you doing, honey? Right? That remains for people living with dementia, right? So that can be a really comforting rhythm to be in with people. Tone of voice as well, right? You've probably heard the term talking down to you, right? When someone is being condescending or someone is talking to you like you're a child. Oh, sweetheart, right? Things like that. People with dementia can pick up on that. And so thinking about our tone of voice and making sure we are still treating people like the adults that they are. Ugly words as well are retained. I don't know why it lives on that part of the brain that is retained throughout this disease, but it is. And so when people are losing other types of formal language, they can't find the words to say, I'm really uncomfortable here. I'm not sure what's going on. I would like to go somewhere else, right? Wouldn't it be great if they could say that? But instead they say, damn, get me out of here. This place has gone to hell, right? And you're like, Mom, we are in church. You can't say that, right? But that's what's going to come out when someone is uncomfortable. So we want to notice, especially if those ugly words are not ones that they normally used, then we want to notice that's just telling us that they're distressed, right? They're not trying to be ugly, especially in church, but that's their only way of communicating. So we might hear some of the language that we consider inappropriate, but that's all they have to communicate with. And so I'll take it and I'll understand that something needs to change here and we can help that person. And that music and rhythm, of course, that's retained is a wonderful gift, right? You'll see some people as they move through this disease process that are no longer able to produce language to speak. But when you put on that hymn that they've loved forever, they will start to sing. And so they can sing the words because it's stored in a different part of the brain. So it can be really beautiful to connect with people using music and rhythm. Same thing with those prayers, right? Our Father who art in heaven, right? People will follow the rhythm of those prayers that they've known forever. Something to know is that hearing is unchanged by dementia. Now, you could have hearing loss because dementia is also associated with aging, typically, right? And so even though it's not a normal part of aging, most people who are living with dementia are older, not all, but most. And so we might have hearing changes because the person is older, but actually dementia is not actually affecting hearing. So unless they have a hearing impairment, it might be that they can hear you, but that they can't understand you, right? So we think about how we communicate a little bit differently. And then executive function. So this can change pretty early in people with Alzheimer's disease in particular, because it's stored right here behind your forehead. And it's what makes us have good judgment, have impulse control, decision making, make a good decision, come up with a rational conclusion, see somebody else's perspective, understand my flaws and my abilities accurately, right? So anybody out there who's ever raised teenagers has probably noticed that teenagers are typically not very good at any of these things, right? Because that part of the brain develops last, right? Which is why car insurance is so expensive for young men, right? Because this actually develops earlier in women than men because they make terrible choices, right? And so this develops last in human brains, right? So this is why young people make some questionable choices until they're in their early, mid, sometimes late 20s, and then people start to simmer down because they're getting those executive functions fully formed in their brain. So that makes it very susceptible to being hit pretty early in a lot of these diseases that cause dementia. And so that part of the brain will start to change. And so people are having trouble leading the church meeting that they used to always lead very confidently and very organized. And that's starting to change. And so we're noticing that and thinking about how can we support them as maybe we need to start talking with their family or with their getting them to their physician. So thinking about if some of these functions start to change from their baseline, then we need to get them some help. And then visual changes. So visual changes, it's not like we're losing like a field cut, but actually people with dementia are slowly, their field of vision is getting smaller, almost like they're wearing binoculars, right? Because when our brains are having trouble processing all of this information, because we're having a failure of the brain, right? We shut out the things that aren't important, right? You and I do this too when we're under threat, right? We get a real surge of adrenaline in our big muscles to help us fight, flight, or fright, right? And we also focus all of our visual field straight in front of us because in prehistoric times, that's where the saber-toothed tiger was coming at us, right? And so our brains have this amazing ability of focusing on only what matters when other things are not working well. And that's what it's doing with dementia, right? It's trying its best to get all of that information in and processed. And so we're losing peripheral vision, right? So when we think about approaching somebody with dementia who's in our congregation at church, we want to make sure we walk all the way around and come from the front with a, hey there, Ron, good to see you, right? We give him a nice wave right by our face so he can see us, right? Instead of coming up from behind or from the side where they're not going to see us in their peripheral vision, we might startle them and cause them to fall or cause them to swing out at us when they don't mean any harm. It's just that they can't see us coming from the side. So giving people plenty of time and space and coming from the front. And then I put this big one in red here at the bottom. Retain is the amygdala, which is one of my favorite brain words. And the amygdala is where we process fear and joy, right? So that saber-toothed tiger that's coming at us, it's our amygdala that goes, whoa there, this is something dangerous. I better get out of here or I better fight this tiger, right? Same thing with joy, pleasure, wants. It's what gets us what we want and what we need, right? So it's what gets us to get that sugary food because my brain is starting to feel like it's not working too well. I'm going to eat some sugar and that's going to help me out, right? And so it helps us meet our wants and it helps us get away from things that we fear. And that's typically retained throughout the course of this disease. So it's important to remember that because we want to make sure that in our interactions and in our settings, especially our worship services and other church situations, that we understand the person with dementia is responding to what they want or need and also to what they fear. So we want to make sure that we are trying to bring down that fear impulse and get their needs met, right? So if they are hungry, if they are thirsty, if they have to go to the bathroom, if they are feeling socially uncomfortable, if they are feeling frightened, anything like that can cause someone's behavior, yours and mine as well, but we do a better job with our executive function of holding off for a minute, right? But if somebody with dementia has an unmet need, they're going to do whatever they can to meet that. And that might end up being a word or a behavior that is something that we don't necessarily like, but that's what their body and their brain is going to do. So we just want to make sure we're meeting people's needs so that they don't have those negative emotions or physical sensations because they will respond to those, but not always in the way that we like people to. So we want to keep that in mind whenever we can. We want to cause joy and try not to cause fear. So how can we help? How do we help? How do we bring all this information about what's changing in the brain and help people? So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with an acronym, and I want to show you a quick video of what it looks like. So I came up with this acronym for y'all, and it's GRACE, because that's a common word that we use in a church community, right? And we have to show a lot of grace to each other and to people living with dementia among us. So the first one is go with the flow. So if somebody living with dementia says something off the wall or does something, we just got to go with the flow. We're not going to correct them. We're not going to tell them, no, stop, right? We're just going to go with it. Repeat the person living with dementia's words. So if they tell you something, boy, this is terrible, right? I want to, again, go with the flow and repeat what they say. Oh, you feel terrible, or you think this is terrible, right? So that they feel heard, right? We want people to feel heard and seen. And then we want to advance the conversation by maybe steering in a different direction, right? Boy, that was a terrible sermon, right? Okay, well, we don't want to talk about that for too long. That's not pleasant, right? But we want to advance that conversation. So we want to say, boy, wait, that was terrible, huh? Wow, yeah, that was not what you were expecting, was it? Oh gosh. Well, you know what I like to do when I hear a terrible sermon? I like to go get some lemonade. How about we kind of think about doing that, right? So we're going to kind of let's keep it moving, right? So we've supported the person in how they feel, but we're going to keep moving. Or if they ask you something you don't know the answer, right? So where's Sally today? Well, Sally's either not here and I don't know why, or Sally might have died a couple of weeks ago and this person doesn't remember, right? What do I do there? I might just apologize. I am so sorry. I don't know. You really are missing Sally, aren't you? Boy, she is a wonderful church member. You know, y'all were on the flower committee together. I remember, right? So I'm understanding what they were looking for, and then I'm advancing the conversation, apologizing that I don't know where Sally is, but we're going to move on to a different direction. And then always consider the unmet need, right? What are they looking for in this behavior, in this language they're using, in this whatever is happening? What might their unmet need be, right? Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Do they need to go to the bathroom? Are they scared? Are they bored? Are they unsure of what to do and they're embarrassed? Are they, right? Any of these physical or emotional unmet needs could be present. And the thing is, you and I can usually meet those, right? Because our brain is working in lots of wonderful ways that for somebody living with dementia, they might not have that part of the brain that's going to help them meet that need. And so that might be where we can show grace to people by helping them. And then empower your congregation. So caring for somebody living with dementia is a community effort. It takes way more than one person in order to care for somebody living with dementia, to care for their primary caregiver, right? We want to make sure that our congregation learns as much as we can, which is why I'm so glad everybody's here today to learn a little bit more. I'm always glad to help faith communities to learn even more. My contact info is going to be on the handout that they'll send out to you. So I'm always glad to come and work with churches and help people to learn more so that your congregation is able to really support the needs of people with dementia. So I'm going to show you a quick video. It is a 1-minute video clip. So it is very, very quick. Let me see if I can do a stop share here real quick. And I'm going to pull up another video. And that is going to be a simulated scenario that a couple of my dementia care buddies and I made. And what you're going to see is we've got a pastor. Her name is Heather. And she, over there on the right, and she is greeting this church member, Melanie, and Melanie's son, who's helping bring her to church. And Melanie is living with dementia. So I want you to think about the concept of grace. How is Heather and Matthew, how are they going with the flow, repeating the person's words to let Melanie know that she's been heard, advancing that conversation, and considering her unmet needs?
Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
Well, hey, sweetheart. I'm Melanie Gail Bunn, and you are
Melanie, I'm Heather, Pastor Heather.
Pat. Well, what happened to Pastor Jones?
You're thinking about Pastor Jones.
Well, of course I am.
Any good?
He was the best. He
That's
sure
right.
is.
I really love him too.
Yeah. So what happened?
Well, I'm the pastor here since Pastor Jones retired.
Oh, well, are you the best they could find?
Mama,
What-
I remember
what,
you told me last week how much you loved Pastor Heather's sermon.
Well, and I was right.
Yeah,
Oh,
you are.
Of
you know
course.
about these things, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course I was. Well, we better get in
Come
there
on.
for somebody. Oh, well, I
What was
always
that?
get these.
Yes, you do.
Good.
Always do.
Come on in the house.
Well, where else would I be on Sunday morning?
That's right.
So did you see the ways that Pastor Heather and son Matthew were supporting Melanie? Nobody corrected her. Nobody told her, well, we don't say that, Mom, right? Instead, Matthew says, well, Mom, you told me you loved Pastor Heather's sermon, right? So he's trying to build her up, even though she's just said something offensive. Well, are you the best they can come up with, right? And Heather just laughs and gives her that grace, because Melanie's having an unmet need right now, which is something has changed. And I'm not comfortable with this person who's not Pastor Jones being in charge of this church, right? And so everybody is acting with grace in this situation to help Melanie to get into the worship service, right? So if we have more time, I got a lot more of those interesting clips to think about how we support somebody like Melanie in that congregation and as she's changing in her dementia, right? And so going from kind of earlier to the middle stages to the end of her life. So I want to encourage you all to keep learning, and I'm so glad to be here with you all. And I would love any questions that you have. If folks have been thinking about things, either put them in the chat or some of our group leaders can share them out with me. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
And Loy, if people would like to take themselves off of mute and ask those questions, they can also
Yeah.
do that.
Absolutely. I'd also love to hear if any of your churches are already doing things that are supporting people living with dementia. I love hearing what churches are up to be supportive.
This is Annie McIver from the Cameron Grove AM Zion Church in Broadway. And my question is, would you be able to do a presentation like the one that you did today if we invited you, by Zoom?
Yeah, absolutely. So my contact information is going to be on the handout that Arlisha is going to make sure everybody gets. And yeah, I'm always glad to be by Zoom or in person or do a series or a combination. Always glad to be with churches for sure. So yeah, get in touch and let me know. I'd love to.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And Loy, as you were speaking, I was thinking about your presentations could be really good for an adult participants or children, because sometimes children don't know how to engage with family members or members of churches or their community. So I know that you could probably help them. And I think we have a question from Sheila Crump. If you'd like to get off of mute, we can take your question.
I did not. Hello, greetings from Word of Life United Church of Christ. I am glad to be here to hear this presentation. I just want to thank you for the presentation also. And I am a pastor that worked with my mom that had dementia until she passed. Been a year now. And I really appreciate the presentation. I can see myself in it as she was speaking about it. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Sheila. Yeah, and that means a lot to me when I hear from seasoned caregivers like you, when they see themselves in what I'm saying, that really helps me to know I'm in the right direction.
In room
Yes,
213, if you have questions, you can either call me on the phone, or if you want to type them in the chat, we'll receive those questions. And so if you want to call me directly, we can get those questions to her, or if you want to just type it in the chat, if those of you who are in the group setting. Oh, okay, you can take yourself off of mute. Room 213 have questions? You may have to come closer to the actual speaker of the computer for the questions. And so if you could speak into the computer. Okay, go ahead. I may need you to come closer to the actual computer unit. Okay. So we're not able to hear you. If you could call me on the line that you used before, we can hear you that way. If you could call me on whoever called me before, if you go ahead and call me, we can get those questions. Just call me on my cell phone.
Okay.
So they'll be coming in. So Loy, a couple of things that I noted, you were talking about the executive function and how those things, is that considered the frontal lobe that people often refer to?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Part of the
That was good. That was good. Another thing is you were talking, I'm waiting for that call to come in. People, or I don't know, this might take us in another direction, have been referring to dementia as like type 3 diabetes. Are you
Mm.
seeing any actual data or studies where that is being attributed to, or is that just kind of jargon people are using now?
I've heard somebody else say that. I'm not exactly sure where that originates from. There is a very strong correlation between diabetes and dementia, meaning when you have diabetes, your risk for dementia really skyrockets. So I don't know why that's happening, but that is a strong risk factor. So anything you can do to reduce your risk of diabetes, or if you have diabetes, to manage that diabetes, to keep that glucose under control, that will help reduce your risk of dementia. So yeah, there's definitely a link there. But a lot of things about dementia are still a mystery, which is
Okay.
the problem. Yeah.
We have two questions. One, Stephanie Humphrey, I'll come to you next. It says, if a person consumed heavy alcohol in their lifetime, could this cause a person to have dementia later in life?
Yes. Yeah, that's also a big risk factor. So there is a specific type of dementia that is caused by heavy alcohol use, earlier in life. Yeah. So, and that can be kind of hard to tease out too, right? Because some of the symptoms of alcoholism themselves can look like dementia, but really the dementia is coming later. It's not the acute phase of alcoholism, right? So, but yes, there is a strong correlation between high substance use and dementia.
Okay. Stephanie Humphrey, you want to go ahead with your question?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Loy. My question is, my grandfather is 96 right now, and he is still in his right mind, lives on his own, still drives, all of that. But his sister passed away with dementia for a couple of years. She was either right after her 100th birthday or right at 99. And so I'm trying to figure, just listening to you, I'm thinking, should we be having a conversation like my family? Should we be having a conversation with my granddaddy? I'm hoping that he doesn't get dementia, but I am a little concerned that it could come. Should we have a conversation with him about what dementia is and what might happen if he should get that, or should we just wait? Or what kind of advice could you give us, just to help us with that if in the event it should happen, like getting him ready for it potentially?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always helpful when people are open to it. That's the challenge, is that dementia is very frightening to a lot of people because a lot of people don't know a lot about it. They don't know how to interact with people with dementia. So they think, oh, there's nothing we can do. And it's very scary. Whereas learning things about dementia and these care techniques, we have days and days of training material to help people work with people with dementia. So we're not powerless, but I think it's hard to have those conversations because a lot of people are very scared of dementia, so they just don't want to talk about it, right? That's what we do in America. We just don't talk about things that we don't talk about death, we don't talk about aging, we don't talk about dementia, and that's really to our detriment. So yeah, I would say if your loved one is open to having a conversation, it seems like he's aging normally now, which is awesome. And hopefully that'll keep being the case. But it's always helpful before somebody shows signs of change to have these conversations about what would you want if, right? So what would you want if you have dementia, we're having trouble caring for you at home? Is there, don't ever promise someone that you will never put them in a facility. Please don't put that on yourself, because sometimes that is the answer you have to have, right? But asking them, is there something that you would want in the event of this? Especially things like cardiac arrest, right? Do you want to be resuscitated if you have dementia and you have a cardiac arrest? Do you want us to change your wishes in order to be resuscitated or not? If you have, so all of those kinds of things about what would you want in this situation if you can't tell me, that's really helpful. a more lighthearted thing to do, a conversation to have in that situation would also be like, tell me your top 10 favorite songs. Tell me your top 10 favorite hymns. Tell me your top 10 favorite pop culture songs. Tell me your top 10 favorite, Bible verses. Tell me some smells that you really love. Tell me some smells that you really hate, right? Tell me what helps you feel calm. Tell me, right? All of these things that you and I do to regulate ourselves and help us when we are feeling scared or sad or tired or feeling down and we'll want to feel better. All of this that we do, a lot of times other people don't know that we're doing it, right? And so, knowing what are those things that bring people comfort and those things that really bring people distress, if you have all of that written down about someone, it really can help somebody who's caring for them, whether that person will be you or whether that will be someone who's paid in a dementia care community or whether that's going to be someone else in the home. All of those kinds of things that make up us as people, both as church-going people and as people who eat food and people who, knowing all of those kinds of things that help bring us comfort, and the things that bring us distress so we can try to avoid them are great conversations to have when somebody doesn't have dementia. Because right now, most of what we have is good caregiving in order to help somebody with dementia to live as well as they can. So it's going to help your caregivers if you know all of that stuff about someone. And some of it you might already know, but thinking about some of those deeper questions. So it makes me think I should start like a workbook or something of like, what are the things you should ask people, right? So
It sounds like it'd be helpful.
Thank you.
yeah.
A workbook or, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And the
work
workbook would definitely be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so, Loy, we have two more questions. One
Absolutely.
is someone raising their hands. I'll get to them. And then we also have another in the chat. And so before you leave out, I know some people may need to leave early. We're going to continue the conversation so she can answer the questions. We've put in the chat box the survey. Loy mentioned that she can do training in some areas of this. So if you're interested, there is a space at the bottom of our survey instrument. So, put in there how this was meaningful to you so that we can know if maybe we need to have Loy back to continue this discussion. So Lisa, and I think room 213 still has a question. I'm not sure if we can hear them yet, and then we'll go to Sherry Bowers. So Lisa, if you want to take yourself off of mute and ask your question.
Yeah. Hi, Loy. This is Lisa. I'm from Asheville. I'm the daughter of someone who has dementia. My dad is 93. But what you said that piqued my interest is the fact that they are very aware of tone of voice. And so talking in shorter sentences, which I find is very helpful for my dad, but also not talking down to them. I think that's a hard ask. And I just wondered if you had more to say about that.
Yeah, it's really hard to do. I do a lot of occupational therapy work in the hospitals, and I catch myself all the time. Like, what is going on with your tone of voice, Loy? Like, you can tell, right? And maybe there's someone else in the home that can also help you to notice that. It's a hard thing to do because that's our caring voice, right? That's how we talk to small children. It's very hard to not have that tone of voice, but sometimes that'll get you in trouble because the person with dementia might be able to notice that. They might not, but a lot of times they will, and you'll get called out on it. Well, who do you think I am? Who do you think you are? You're my daughter. Who are you to tell me, right? It's like, oh no. So yeah, it's really challenging. So sometimes the person with dementia will tell you, you'll know by their response that you're having that tone of voice. And other times somebody else in the home might tell you, or you might notice it in yourself. I notice it a lot, and it's just, you got to give yourself some grace too.
Indeed. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Loy, I'm grateful that you mentioned the part about ugly words, because sometimes in interacting with our loved ones, even people who did not use them in their life, they start using them. So it's a shock, but just kind of touching on her question, like we have to refrain, even if those ugly words come, because we can't get into an ugly word match, because, you've helped us understand what it is that's happening in their brain. So thank
Yeah.
you for that. Room 213, we're going to see if we can try this one more time. And we can't hear you.
Wonder if they can type in the chat.
You type in the chat, or can you just call me on the phone? We're fine with you calling us on the phone. And so for now, we're going to go to Sherry. And if you want to just call me, I'll answer and we'll let Loy hear.
Right.
Sherry,
Yes.
asked the question, are there any known things to help prevent dementia for aging congregants?
Nice. Yeah, this is a great question. So I would change the word prevent, because right now there's nothing I can say like, eat this food and you won't get dementia, right? So there's nothing like that. But I would change that word prevent to reduce your risk, right? So there are lots of things you can do to reduce your risk. And you already know all of them, because they're the things we're all supposed to be doing already that we try to do, and it's so hard. So like I said earlier, managing diabetes, trying to prevent diabetes. So a lot of that is diet, exercise, things like that. Diet and exercise also have a healthy effect on all systems of the body and brain, and therefore it's going to help reduce your risk of dementia. That being said, I've met a lot of people who get a lot of exercise and eat a healthy diet, and they also have gotten dementia, right? So it's not preventative, but it does reduce your risk. When I say healthy diet, we mean anything that's heart healthy. So, the heart healthy diet, lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of healthy protein, avoiding too much red meat, avoiding too much alcohol, all of that kind of heart healthy diet stuff. Anything that's heart healthy is brain healthy. Eating enough fish. So a lot of times having fish a time or two a week will help as well. So exercising. So meeting the recommendations for exercise, which I think is about 2.5 or 3 hours a week. So 30 minutes ish a day of moderate exercise, taking a walk, things like that. So diet, exercise, making sure you get enough sleep. So everybody knows that sleep is important. And in America, we work way too hard and we don't get enough sleep. Sleep is where the brain kind of cleans itself out, right? Your brain is surrounded by cerebrospinal fluid, right? And when we're sleeping, it gives that brain a chance to rest, and it gives that fluid a chance to clean up, right? And so it's very, very important to get enough sleep. So that's a big one. Managing stress, of course, is important. Social connection. There've been studies about social connection and staying socially connected in your community, whether it be in a faith community, like lots of you are in, or in your quilting group or your pickleball group or your Lions Club, or whatever way that you can stay socially connected and socially engaged. That is a big factor in reducing risk. That's very correlated with reducing risk of depression. And like diabetes, depression is a real big risk factor for dementia. So if we can reduce that risk of having a major depressive episode during our life, then we can really reduce our risk of dementia as well. So basically all the things that our doctors tell us to do that we're like, we don't have time for that. Yeah, those are the things that we should be doing, and they'll all reduce our risk of dementia.
All right, Loy. So we have connected with room 213. So room 213 is actually Southport Trinity United UMC, United Methodist Church in Southport. So this is their health ministry team, and today they're joined by nurses, an
Yay.
EMT, a pharmacist, and someone in PT. And
All
so they're
right.
listening because they want to connect with you later so they can share this information with the broader community. So we're grateful for those in the medical community who understand how important and vital this information is. And so we're so grateful that they're with us this day. And so, Loy, it sounds like we got to figure out how to bring you back. We're going to have some programming in the fall, and so hopefully, whether it's virtual or face to face with some of the regional programming that we'll be planning, it sounds like people have a lot of questions. You've given us a very robust presentation in the time we have been together. I have shared the link to the survey, and so if all of you can fill the survey out, for those of you in room 213, I'm going to actually send the link in a text message and she'll get an email. So if you have some feedback for us, we'd appreciate that. If you could tell us what portion of this conversation you'd maybe like for her to talk about more in depth at a later time, you can do that on a survey or you can email us. At this time, I'm supposed to be in a slideshow, but I'm going to pull that up. Lloyd, we were talking about doing multiple things at multiple times. And I was sharing with Loy how that is not as easy as I age and as I kind of continue to do this work. And so you all have the information for the survey, if you can complete our survey. And if you have any more questions about PHW programs, you can email us at phwinfo@ncchurches.org, or you can visit our website. On our website, the study guide I've referenced, there is the link to request copies of that or the link to actually download a hard copy. Loy, any parting words as we leave for today? Anything maybe you wanted to say or respond that maybe you've thought of since you've gotten all of these questions at the end? And thank you for being with us, all of you staying with us a few minutes longer.
Yeah. I'm just filled with gratitude that all of you are here and that all of you are interested in learning about how we can support people with dementia and their families and caregivers. As you know, it can be a really long road and it can be a lonely one for a lot of these caregivers and for the people living with dementia. So having a faith community to surround them with love and support is vital. So I thank you for wanting to learn more and for being here today. And I look forward to next time.
Thank you. And so as we would leave this digital space, we never leave God's presence. So we leave today with love, with patience, with grace, to love and to care for and to serve this world. Thank you so much for being with us. And we pray that you will return for our next edition of Abundant Life webinars later in the year. Thank you so much for being with us. Have an amazing day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Miss Annie. Thank you, Loy. I'll be in touch with you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Arlisha.
Have a blessed day.
You too. Thanks.